Greetings. I am Tom Earl. Welcome to the celebration. We know you could be anywhere. So, joining us here today, I want to express my gratitude. You are valued, you are appreciated, and you are loved just as you are. As you can see, I'm not alone. We have episode 2 with my good friend Estuardo David Mazariegos. How are you doing? How you feeling about episode 2?
I'm doing great. I'm feeling good. Ready to have another conversation over here.
All right, let's do it. We can go camera off. There we go. Okay, so before I jump in, do you have any questions you want to throw into the space you're curious about? Anything that you want us to talk? Go ahead.
Yeah. Why are you interested in what's inside people?
Oh, where's that question coming from? What brought that one up for you?
Just the conversation right now that we had, I think you're looking at people deeper than their flesh. And you're trying to understand people. So why?
I think it's because I myself am deeply introspective and curious and sometimes confused by my own self. And from a young age, I experienced the effed upness of the way things are structured. And I think I didn't have the words for it, but recognized that something's very wrong with the environment I'm in. And I think that led me to asking questions. And it seemed like the more questions I asked, the more upset or resistant it seemed that the teachers or a good majority of the authority figures in my life were. And then definitely when I started to listen to punk rock, that started to give me new perspectives, and it felt like finally some answers. And then when I was in college, I majored in music and art for the first 3 years of my degree, and that was definitely a very rigorous, reflective process. And then I finished my degree in African diaspora studies, and that I feel like was like a great unlocking of like a realization, a validation that I was like something's wrong, and also a realizing how much I didn't know and how much of what I thought I knew was not true.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the intellectual side, but then I've also just been deeply spiritual of like what we've been talking about. Like there is something magical and powerful that we can't see that is good and feels good. And I feel like there used to be tools and rituals and socialization that would give you a greater access to those tools and to being able to communicate with this thing that's bigger than ourselves, this magic that's all around, that interconnectedness. And it seems to have become, instead of getting those tools, we're given personality stories. So your religion is very much the personality of the deities or saints or gods or prophets that comprise that religion, and the strict interpretation of those people's stories and the sense of self that's created by being hypnotized by those stories. That's kind of like what we're given now instead of actual tools to connect with God. And so, I think all those things are going on. And so I think I find that like deep conversation is kind of like journaling or meditation. I think it can be a portal into stillness and into that interconnectedness, both through the mind, but also through the body in terms of feelings.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Go ahead.
That's a great answer.
Well, that was a good question.
Yeah.
Mine was going to be along the same lines for you. Where, when, how, when did, because I heard a lot of your answers were on a spiritual level, talking about spiritual journeys, honoring the interconnectedness, talking about people being spiritually broken. When did you start to embrace or have that shape your worldview?
I mean, I think it's always been a part of who I am as a person, but I really didn't fully define it until I started organizing. And I think that's why organizing is such an important thing to me. I always knew I wanted to work with people. I always knew that talking to people, feeling connected to people was important to me. I used to get in trouble for it when I was in school. She is like one of those things that we were talking about earlier, where we are taught to kind of ignore that connectivity, or we're taught to like think it's like not real, or like, to be broken up as a community or as a species, to be individualistic. Because even at school, I used to be the talker in class. I used to talk to everybody, and I used to get in trouble for talking to everybody, for getting out of my seat. I was never really a rule follower in that way. I always felt like I needed to talk to people to fully feel alive. So I used to always get in trouble. And I knew as I got older, like, I did a bunch of different things in my life before I became an organizer. I was an aircraft fielder and air conditioning technician, all kinds of different things, and just never feel fulfilled because I wasn't talking to people. And then what ended up happening was I found organizing. And through organizing, I got to do what I love to do all day, which is talk to folks. And in talking to folks, I felt like, especially like, early on, and still to the day, when I like go on canvassing teams and I talk to like, everybody in the neighborhood, and I just feel this light and this connection to people. So that's where it comes from.
All right. I resonate with that, but for me it was facilitation. Learning to facilitate dialogue, especially around anti-bias and experiential conversations, that I found like giving people all these facts and insights I had that unless somebody was already there, that it was a hard, like, knowledge, intellectual was a hard route for people to experience change. But the conversation and getting to arrive at a conclusion for yourself, that I resonate with that too, like the way you're talking about organizing.
Yeah, it's just like the art of conversation connects you to people, right? Because you're like just expressing yourself, especially, I don't know, just like asking people what they feel is always, or how they think. It always connects you to a broader community.
So what does organizing look like for you?
I started by doing door knocking in the community, just talking to people about their community issues and that sort of stuff. And then now I've become kind of like a professional organizer, meaning that like I talk to like directors of other organizations and politicians and that sort of stuff. So it's just like a little different. Like before, I used to do a lot of cold door knocking. And through that cold door knocking, just talking to everybody. Now I talk to a very specific set of people. I used to talk to thousands of people like a month almost, or like, over the course of periods of time. But now I feel like I talk to the same 150 people, which are like policy directors and designers and representatives of large groups of people. So it's just talking to people, organizing, finding commonality, finding issues, finding intersectionality, creating consensus, collaborating, cooperating, and designing together, like, different version of the way things exist right now. So that's what organizing is to me. It's putting people together in rooms and talking ideas out.
Did you have some sort of a process that you'd use when you talk to somebody?
I just listen to them. I think it's just like active listening is the biggest part of the process, is like, making sure people feel heard and that you're absorbing the things that they're telling you, and identifying issues and intersections is another big thing.
And did you get a lot of like doors slammed in your face and leave me alone?
Oh yeah, a ton. That's like 40% of our well, more than that. It's just like a ton of no's, a ton of no's. I've learned how to take rejection really well.
What's the secret?
There's always another door. And it might be a no now and it's going to be a yes later, and just kind of forgetting that, forgetting those rejections and just knowing that it's just the moment, it's not permanent. It's like everything is temporary. So just moving on to the next door.
Well, I've never done door to door, but I've done outbound sales calls where I call like 50 people a day. And that I also had to find that same mentality, and mine didn't even have an element of, community activism.
That I used to have to do 50 conversations. It was very similar. Just those conversations are just like, and it was interesting because you had to kind of let people know you're just meeting somebody for the first time, and you have to have them believe in themselves. And a lot of people don't believe in themselves. So it's just, it's magical, to see somebody grow in front of you through a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's been on your mind recently? What's something you've been chewing on or curious about people's thoughts on?
I think the biggest thing is probably how people build silos, right? Like how we like start identifying with what we perceive as our tribes, right? Like this team against that team, this organization against that organization. How can we break that down to collaborate together to do the things that we have to do? So that's been a big thing for me, is just like learning how not to take things personally and just trying to operate from a perspective that everybody's trying to do the best they can. So it's always good. What have you been chewing on lately?
Well, I'll answer that one, but I wanted to kind of like build off what you're saying there. That's really, really hard to do when you're building a movement or selling a product or selling an idea.
Yeah.
It was one of I had a big reckoning with marketing this time last year.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of it, because one of the most effective ways to sell anything is to use a heroes and villains model.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I think we talked about this when you came over for dinner.
Yeah.
Where if you're like, hey, all the people that you like, I like them too. All the people you don't like, I also don't like them. All your problems, they happen to be your villain's faults. And I happen to know a solution that will sell anything, whether it's like, usually the villain doesn't have to be a person. It can be the algorithm. It can be ideas, but that's also, you can use it for politics. I mean, I remember when Newsom, the recall was happening, nobody was necessarily motivated to keep Newsom in office, but when he was like, when they switched their campaign to being like, okay, well, the alternative is basically a Trump, and it was like, okay, I don't want to live in California. It's like that worked. It's like being like, and that's going to be kind of like Biden's strategy. Like, I mean, do you want Trump? So it's very effective to build a movement around siloing, around us versus them.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I don't think people have a lot of space for leaders who don't want to do that. So how do you navigate that?
I navigated through connecting with people, number one, and just like finding out about people and what motivates them, and presenting myself as a person that's willing to learn new ways of being and understand where folks are coming from, and also just being like genuine, I think, is an important thing. Like, not trying to be performative, although like a lot of what I do is performative. I try to bring my truest self to every conversation I have. And I think that's what resonates with people and me, is just that like I pay close attention to be my most authentic self, and that connects with everybody's authenticity. And people can tell that I'm just like, just being there, right? Being in the moment, I think, is a big thing for me. And also just, when I hear those things, when I hear those tones of division of me and me against them, there is a place for that in a way. And at the same time, it shouldn't be the center of the conversation. It's always about the greater good, you know? Because the truth of it is that there are people out there that are hell bent on exploitation, right? And division. And we have to be able to say, yeah, there are those people, and those people aren't us. Like, it's folks that are trying to divide us that aren't a part of us. Um, but like overall, always like, recognizing everybody's humanity, and like recognizing your own humanity, and being able to identify those places where you yourself might have, blind spots where you're not guard, where you're easily divided with other people, right? Like, everybody has it. It's always the me, the us, against them mentality, but that's false. So it's always like being aware of where that unconscious bias lies, and like challenging it when you feel it.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. Like the nuance of wanting to divide the silos, while also there is times where, like, I think a part of justice is calling people in to accountability, whether that's leaders, systems, structured, mob mentality, but it's not just a like, let's all get along, I don't see color. Like, that's not what we're referring to of breaking down silos of. So I hear you on that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think, it's important to challenge the division, right? It's important to challenge the folks that are trying to exploit. So, yeah, power. Power is a big thing.
How'd you get into hiking?
It's just always been hiking since I was a little kid. I used to hike a lot. I was born in Guatemala, which is like a super mountainous country, and I think I know my conception story, which is kind of funny. My mom and my dad went on a hike, and they made me on a hike up a volcano. They were going up this like super big volcano. In Guatemala, there's a lot of volcanoes, so I was conceived on a mountain. And I think it was kind of like my dad told me this story before he died. My dad died like 6 years ago. And he was just like telling me one day, like, hey, I'm gonna tell you where we made you. And he told me, and he was just like, I didn't know whether or not he was messing around or not. And then when he died, like a couple of days later, I like had a conversation with my mom, and I was like, hey, is this true? And she started laughing and crying at the same time. And I knew it was true at that point, right? Where she was just like, yeah, it happened in a mountain. And I was just like, oh my God. So, right. But like, I don't know, my dad, I grew up in the city. I grew up in Los Angeles, and my dad always made sure to take us to Griffith Park, which is like my favorite park in LA. There's like a lot of hills and mountains up that park. And like, just growing up going into those mountains was like my favorite memories of him. Was some of my favorite memories with him. And then as I got older and you know had difficult times in my youth, like I found my way back to myself. I realized that when I started going back to hiking as I got, in my younger adulthood, I was able to like reconnect with that inner voice and find that peace. And just experience the joy and beauty of our city through the mountains. Just seeing the different colors that appear in the sky as the sun sets and how the lights turn on. It's a different experience hiking in Los Angeles than it is anywhere else. Because when you hike in LA, you are going up mountains, but you're still surrounded by city. So it's just this experience of like seeing the sunsets. The Southern California sunsets are a thing. It's like super colorful and just different colors of pink and orange and everything. And then seeing the lights come on across the city is like feeling like you're like floating in the galaxy almost because you just see all these lights come on and it looks like you're in the middle of the Milky Way. So it's kind of like a weird thing. It's hiking in the city that made me like hiking. And then over time, just exploring other places that aren't quite like here that made me realize that, there is a lot of beauty out there that isn't connected to concrete too. So, yeah.
That's very poetic. Talking about your conception and then how you ended it. A lot of beauty that isn't concrete. I took Adora on a night hike to this one spot, and I was like, "You can't. You have to see it to describe it." And you get it, where it's like, it feels like you're on top of the city with all the lights below you, but like you said, it's like this galaxy thing. It's like this surreal thing to, especially if you can be surrounded. Like if you can do a hike that's in the middle of the city, where you're up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I understand what you're talking about. It's just you feel like you're floating above a galaxy, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I loved how one time I was hiking on one of the kind of like back trails, and then I was like, I recognize that baby, and then it's like, and I recognize that person, and there you were, and there we were running into each other unplanned.
Yeah. I mean, like that's a connection, right? It's finding each other in nature and sort of surrounded by the city. But yeah, I remember that day. It was like the middle of summer. I think whenever I'm hiking, I'm always thinking about deep things. So I was probably thinking about something and I saw you. I still remember that conversation we had. I think we were talking about sadness.
Yeah.
And we talked about the pandemic and how it impacted each one of us. And then kind of separated a little bit. And you went your way, I went my way. But it was a deep conversation we had. And that conversation we had is usually what I carry on inside of me when I'm by myself or with my baby on my back at that moment. So I had her in my backpack and everything, right? So it's always like moments for me like that are able to like do deep reflections and, ask some questions of myself.
Yeah, going on a hike is one of the best facilitators of deep conversation for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Do you like to listen to anything while you're hiking?
I used to love listening to music while I was hiking. And then I lost my headphones and I haven't been doing that as much. And I realized that it's much more meditative to do physical activity like hiking or biking without music, without other people's voices. And you're kind of more in tune with your body. And you hear the sounds of nature and you hear the brush or the woods or the feet as you move across the ground or the ocean as you walk next to it or yourself, breathing. So it's like, it goes back to what we were saying earlier again, is just like connection, right? Like listening to music is cool. I like listening to music everywhere. But when you are walking in nature, it's kind of music itself. Like the rhythm of your steps, the way the wind is blowing, the birds chirping, all of that is like nature's music, right?
Yeah, for me that's true if you're somewhere quiet, but so many of the hikes around here, the city noise is so loud.
Yeah.
that I prefer. Like I'll do like an instrumental or something so it's not just cars and honking and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I listen to jazz if I listen to music.
You ever hike in Joshua Tree?
I have not a lot, but I have in the past. I've been there a couple times. I've hiked a lot more like in the redwood forest, the ancient groves, and just like in northern, like in terms of like more nature outdoor stuff outside of the city, definitely like Northern California, Central Coast forests, coastal redwoods, sequoias. Out on the Eastern Sierra slopes, I've done some hiking. So Guatemala, I've done some hiking. So yeah, I've gone on like a lot to other nature spots, but definitely limited time in Joshua Tree, which I want to change actually. It's like one of the places I want to explore more.
I gotta go to Sam McDonald Park in San Mateo in July. Have you ever been there?
No.
It's awesome, but it's redwoods. That was my first time getting to hike up there. I loved how like cool the weather was. It was like, here it was like 90s and there it was like 70s. I didn't know that was possible. So that was awesome. And just to be like under a forest canopy was super nice. I love Joshua Tree a lot in the winter. I like it especially in the like back trails where you don't run into anybody all day. And you can just see for miles. And then you also don't have to worry about like really any animals. Like, like when I'm in Wisconsin, I got to worry about potentially bears but out there, if you do see something coming, you'll see it coming like an hour away, so it could really just kind of like totally check out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I agree with you. Well, I mean, like if you go up north, you could run into bears. So
yeah, that's why it's nice, but it's good to go with somebody and to be talking and making some noise, not noise canceling headphones.
It's very true. Yeah, very true. Very true.
Okay, well, we perhaps later on we can do episodes 3 and 4. Otherwise, if we don't get a chance to do that, would love to have you back as a guest for 2024. But this was perhaps we can. This is August right now. We can find some time to record again in November or in the new year.
Okay, sounds good.
So why don't you share with the folks how they can connect?
Yeah, look me up on Instagram, VexIlls, VEXILLZ, or Twitter or X or whatever it's going to be called when this comes out at the same handle, VEXILLZ. And then you can also find me on Facebook under Estuardo Mazariegos.
Perfect. And for us here, we host a monthly journaling workshop. It's with the process in mind. You don't have to have any experience writing or journaling. But if you want to self-reflect and know yourself deeper in a community that likes to nurture belonging, we'd love to have you. And then you also get a monthly journal and access to a private podcast. You can find that tomearl.me/DCM invite. tomearl.me/DCM invite stands for Direct Connect Method. Okay, Estuardo, what is your invitation to those listening? What would you like to invite them to do, to be, to consider, to think about? What's your invitation?
Go walk. Walk a lot, walk in nature, walk in the city. Just go walk. I think that's an important thing.
I'm with you on that. And see if you can watch a sunrise a sunset. Sunrise is too early. Sunset. And to me, a sunset's like a 2-hour experience. So find somewhere where you can sit and watch it for 2-3 hours. It's totally worth it.
It is. I agree.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much.
Okay, no problem, Tom. I hope you have a good trip to Wisconsin, and then I think you're going to Nigeria.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. I hope you have a great trip, and I'll see you when you get back.
Thank you.
Okay.
And to all those who are listening, as always, we're wishing you peace and blessings. Thank you.
Oh, one more thing. I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to join me at tomearl.com/join. Subscribe below, or let's connect on social media. Tom Earl Artist. Thanks again for watching.